everybody, welcome back after the holidays. It is December 27th, at least that's the day you're watching this video. And I hope everybody had a great holiday season and is looking forward to 2022 and is gonna have a safe New Year's. Today's video is a sit down video and we're gonna talk about my journey to my decision to get a guide dog. Everybody's decision to get a guide dog or not to get a guide dog is definitely a personal decision, and everybody's journey is different. I've always referred to different parts of my life as a journey. So that is just one of the words that I use. Now, like I said, this is all like my experiences, and this is not everybody's experience or everybody's struggles, but this is mine, and I thought I would just explain why I chose to live the guide dog lifestyle. So, although my journey would start technically in 1995 when I would start losing my vision, and then maybe even more in 2006 when I actually went legally blind, I'm not going to start my story there. I'm actually going to start my story in December of 2012 to kind of like January 2013 when I decided it was time finally to get cane trained. Now, I became legally blind in 2006, and between 2006 and 2012, I was adamant that I did not want a cane. I did not need a cane. I was able to travel safely. At least I thought I could, and I didn't want it. But in December of 2012, I knew it was time. We had just moved. A couple years prior, I had gone through some vision changes, which completely turned my world upside down. And I really wish I would have had my cane then, but you know, it is what it is. And so I am just going to start this when I started getting cane trained, which was like December 2012 to early 2013. I called up the local blind commission here in Oregon, and they sent out a trainer, and he got me started. And he was the one that I saw in 2007, probably 2008, and wanted me to get cane trained, although I don't know if he realized it was me because he sees so many people. He's so busy. But anyway, I got cane trained. We did the basics with my white cane, with my vision, traveling down the sidewalks, going upstairs, going downstairs, learning how things felt, customizing my cane for myself. We started off with what a lot of people call as a marshmallow roller tip, and we ended up going to a big ball tip because it was just easier on the surfaces that I needed to travel. I still do have the big ball tip on my canes, and that is definitely my cane tip of choice. I was taught the sweeping action, and that's just what he taught us. So we did, I don't remember how many days of just normal training, and he felt like I used my skills and the vision I had, which he was not upset about, to travel safely, and I just needed to get used to my cane. But I hated it. I hated it from the very start. I would bring it with me and not use it. I would not bring it with me. I hated it. I'm not gonna lie. Until probably after I went to this blind class up in Portland, and we traveled from my area into the Portland area. I traveled with a couple other visually impaired individuals, and they were actually the ones who kind of got me realizing that using my cane was not so bad. I ended up realizing that my skills were bad. And if I didn't have the vision I had, I was lost. So in June of 2013, I called him back. This was after a trip to California where I had finally accepted my cane, and I used it to walk on the Golden Gate Bridge, to walk the San Francisco Zoo, to walk Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk, everything like that. I was so independent and it felt amazing, but I needed more training. So I ended up getting more training from him. We decided to do a lot under a blind shield, and we learned a lot about me. We learned that I anticipate a lot, which is not uncommon for a sighted person. We learned that I veer pretty bad. I think I lean one direction. And we learned that I got really excited when I found that curb. So we did end up making some more adjustments. I ended up going to a longer cane, which gave me more time to hit the obstacles and know what I was doing. And I walked into the street. I veered horribly. We had our successes and our fails, and we did it together, and I knew I was safe with him, and he would show me what I did wrong when I would do something wrong. It was an amazing experience, and he told me at the end that my skills had really grown with crossing streets, and that if I ever found a job and I needed more mobility training, that he would come out and he would help me get to know my area. But beyond that, we had kind of done everything we could that I personally needed. So I would continue my walking with my cane. I would do a lot of it, traveling independently, and it felt amazing. Until I realized that I needed to learn Braille. So I started Braille classes and was doing really well in the beginning. And then I realized that my hands would hurt pretty badly while learning Braille. I would get done with like half of a session and I would lose the sensation in my fingertips. We didn't know why, but it made learning Braille very frustrating. So I ended up going to my doctor, and he ended up putting me in these massive hand braces. They were big, and I wore those as much as I could, and ended up having the worst problem, the opposite problem we had hoped, which was that my hands got really weak and I had to stop Braille. And so I went back to my doctor, and he ended up deciding to send me to a neurologist. We also got some blood work done because at that time my mom said her thyroid condition manifested like carpal tunnel. So we wanted to test my thyroid, which all came back fine. It was a long wait to get to the neurologist, probably 6 weeks. Even though I played the blind card, it didn't help. And so I got in with the neurologist. This neurologist had her mindset of what was wrong and was not willing to listen to me about anything. And basically, we had to prove that she was right in her mind, because if I had carpal tunnel, that's what I had, and that's what I had to live with. So we did the nerve testing in my hands, and she was shocked at the results. It ended up I didn't have carpal tunnel, but I had the inflammation of the nerves from my fingertips all the way up into my shoulders on both sides. And when I asked her, what do I do about this? She told me that I needed to not use my hands and take ibuprofen. Neither of those were an option. As a visually impaired person, I use my hands all the time. And when I told her that, she says, well, just don't use your hands. And when I told her I could not take ibuprofen because of my stomach issues, she didn't care. It was, this is the answer, and I wasn't ready to accept that. So I ended up getting changed doctors, because the doctor who had given me the referral to the neurologist left the practice. So I ended up going to my new doctor, and the first thing I did when I got my new doctor is I walked in, I introduced myself, I said, I'm visually impaired and we need to talk. And he listened. He had no clue anything that had happened. He had the chart notes, but that was, about it. He had not had the neurology report left, but just listened to me. And when I told him I was told I couldn't use my hands and that was not acceptable, he looked at me and he said, absolutely not. It's not acceptable, and we need to do something else. So he ended up sending me to an occupational therapist who did more testing, who did more assessments on my hands, and discovered that I didn't only have the inflammation of the nerves, but I had the overuse of all of the muscles from my fingertips to my shoulders. She said this wasn't uncommon for a person who has limited sight, because everything is held like way up here. You're constantly tight, and being a woman, that doesn't help either. So We exhausted her services. We did massages twice a week. We did therapies twice a week. We did stretches. We changed out hand braces to some that were more comfortable. Then we took out the plates in those. We fitted me with armbands to get rid of the knots that were in my arm. We did everything until the end. And when we came up to the end that my insurance would cover, she said, we've kind of exhausted my services, at least what the insurance will cover, and we haven't made a lot of progress because every time you come back in, you're having the same issue. The only thing we were able to do was strengthen my hands because my hands had gotten quite weak. And her and I chatted, and she encouraged me to go get a guide dog. She says, I think a guide dog would take the strain off of your hands. And so I thought about it a lot, but then life happened and I ended up having to go on more medications than I was on. I had a flare up with my eye condition. I ended up having to go on chemotherapy for a while, which was definitely a hard journey. And it was not the time to apply for a guide dog. In fact, I didn't even think about a guide dog at that point. When I got off of chemo and I was trying to build my stamina again, I started developing the hand problems again, and then thought, it is time. It is time to get a guide dog. And so I ended up applying to Guide Dogs for the Blind. It was actually the only school I applied to, living so close to the Boring campus. It just made sense. I had heard of a couple other schools, but didn't realize how big the guide dog school community was and what each school offered. So I went in just knowing Guide Dogs for the Blind, and this is where I was going to go in hopes. And so I applied, and the next day after applying, I got an email. And then after that, I got a home phone interview, and she said that as far as she could tell, I had the right lifestyle. I was volunteering a lot, going independently places. I had the right lifestyle. Then I did all the paperwork, the doctor's appointments. We had to get my eye specialist to send off paperwork, my mobility specialist to send off paperwork, just everything. It did take a lot longer for this process for me specifically because I had some medical concerns that I had to talk to people about, and just it took, I think, a lot longer at this point. I don't know if there was a lot of applications, but it did take me quite a while. It also took a while for the home interview, which I think is why it could have taken so long. I think it took almost 6 weeks from the time I applied for him to come, and we traveled my neighborhood, and he told me honestly, he said, I think you might have too much vision. I think you may use your vision more than you can with a guide dog. And he said that, I just had to be aware of that. And I explained, when I go into dark lights or I go into bright lights, I'm almost completely blind, and, things like that. And so I think he wrote that in his notes. He also said I had to build up my stamina because I definitely didn't have the greatest stamina. And I told him I had just come off of a chemotherapy treatment and I was trying to rebuild my stamina. And so I think he wrote that down as well. But I ended up being approved. It did take a little while, but I was approved, and I was eventually given the class of July 3rd is when I would start. No, July 2nd. Sorry. One day. July 2nd, 2017. And that would be my class date. It was about a year after my approval, which felt really long. But, it was what it was. I didn't know any different. In late November 2016, I was called early and asked if I would be interested in getting my guide dog early. Unfortunately, I couldn't because I had just had abdominal surgery and was in the 6 weeks of not being able to bend or lift or anything like that, and I knew that would not work for getting my guide dog. Interesting enough, this would not have been Bali. I know for a fact that she was still with our puppy raisers at this point, so this would not have been Bali. I then was called early again. I want to say late April, early March of 2017, they told me they had a match for me and could I come. We were in the process of moving and I told them that, and they said, oh, well, that's going to stall the process slightly. We need to get a home interview again when you move. It's only protocol, nothing like super important as long as you're able to travel and get places. So my field rep, who I'd seen before, came back out and he said, you're still able to go places, although I couldn't take the bus anywhere because a bus doesn't come into our area, but I was still getting out and volunteering, and I was looking for work, and we were able to get out in our home neighborhood, and he wasn't concerned. So July 2nd, I went up to Guide Dogs for the Blind to get my first guide dog, and on July 3rd, I was paired with my Bali girl. I probably, if I wouldn't have moved, I could have gone up in May, and it could have been Bali. Not sure, but there's a good chance it could have been because I think she was done with her formal training at this point, so that could have been Bali. I don't know if it was Bali, but it could have been, and but that's okay because I did get matched with my perfect match, my Bali girl, and I would not give up my journey for anything, and I think it was the right time to go up. When I would have gotten called in April or May, there was a lot of stress going on. Even though I wanted to get my guide dog so bad at that point, there was a lot of stress going on, and it wouldn't have been a good time for me to go. But everything worked out great, and I love living the guide dog lifestyle, and I wouldn't give it up for the world. So there's my journey to my guide dog, and this page, the Life as the Guide Dog team page on Facebook, documents most of my journey since then. There is some gaps, but it documents most of my journey since then, and it's now been almost 4.5 years, and I love it. So thank you for listening to this journey. We have one more video coming up at the end of the month on December 31st, and I hope you enjoy it.